Hello and welcome to Radio Free Nintendo. It is... Was that a clap?
No, it might have been a click. Sorry.
Okay. All right, good. 'Cause it was like 12 seconds later. That would have been a new record. Hello and welcome to Radio Free Nintendo. It is December 21st, 2023. We've changed days, but we're still recording. This is the second episode we have recorded tonight, so it is going to be brisker. This is meant to fill the gap between Christmas and New Year's. Actually, it'll probably come out on New Year's Day. It might come out a little bit sooner. Who knows? But this is the other RFN episode for the holidays. This is to give us time away because a lot of us are going to be traveling. So we are here to record our retroactive on The Seventh Guest. This is the game that was selected out of the list of games that you all provided, some of which were denied to me by Google's weird email filtering schemes. But this is the game we landed on, and The Seventh Guest landed on me.
Yeah. Okay.
I was not prepared. So let's give some context here on this game. So Guillaume, did you said you had some history on it?
Well, you know, I've got
did you have the comments?
I got the both. I've got the comments. I've got the Wikipedia page open. I've also got like some French article about it. Well, anyway.
Go for it.
Like basically, you know, like this game came out on April 1st, 1993. This is several months before Myst. I don't think it was the first, FMV game, full motion video game, but it was definitely one of the earlier ones, and it was like one of the early arguments for buying or for selling CD-ROMs, basically.
Right.
I guess I did not realize that at the time. To me, Myst was like the huge game, and it definitely sold more than Seventh Guest has, but the Seventh Guest like definitely sold a lot and was very hyped, and I kind of wonder if part of this is maybe it was not as translated as early as Myst, or I don't know.
No. So I was involved in PC gaming in about 94, 95. So 93, I'd have been 5, 6, somewhere in that neighborhood. But we had a CD-ROM in our PC fairly early. I had a PC in my bedroom in 89, I think. It was a hand-me-down, but I mean, it was. I was 3. So like we were in there pretty early, and this Myst was the bigger game. It just was. Okay. Like not in sales. I think early on, Seventh Guest probably did outsell it because it did get there a little bit sooner.
Yeah.
But I played Myst I think the first time I played it was probably around the time Riven was coming out. So pretty young, relatively contemporaneous. I think what Myst did is it's good. And I think that's a big distinction.
That's it. Full stop.
Yeah, Myst is a good game.
It's been a while since I played Myst, though. Like, are we sure that Myst was good? Because I feel like a lot of
Let me put it to you this way.
Yep.
Myst is playable.
Yeah.
And Myst's world is more interesting than wandering around a mansion where like Monty Python-esque video skits play as you enter a space.
Sure.
Myst doesn't have as much video in it. Like it's got a very limited sets of video, mostly when you're dealing with the books. So at the beginning, you get the book from the father. He's got a little video where he talks about his 2 bastard children. They're not literally bastards; they're just bastards.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go look at the books he imprisoned them in. Each one of them has some video, and then there's some CG stuff, interactive components in the areas you go into, like the rocket ship moves around and some things spin and whatever, shit like that.
Yeah. I
But
remember an
that's all rendered
extended
CG.
like maze sequence on rails.
Yeah, there's something like that in there.
Yeah.
It's just got more variety. Also, a lot of its puzzles are environmental. They're almost prototypes for stuff that you would see in like Resident Evil games later, where you'd have to go find a thing in one place, realize what it is, take it to a different place to use it, or you'd have to take a piece of information you collected with you somewhere else. Seventh Guest, all its puzzles are very self-contained,
Right.
almost to the point where they don't make sense in the world that they're in. But we can kind of get back to that. But yeah, it missed by 95 or so.
Mm-hmm.
Was a significantly more noted and noteworthy game at that point. Like, it was a big deal of a game.
Yeah, although I gotta say, The Seventh Guest was well received back then. Like, it was definitely, people were impressed by its graphics. Greg can tell us later about the just how dazzled people were by its technology. But
well, we need to give proper credit. We had an email in from someone who chooses to be known as Mega Yarn Boshi, who
Nice.
We must say, with the Super Mario RPG remake, is more plausible that such a thing could happen, I suppose, than previously we would have thought. But they sent in a link to a scan of the Game Pro issue, where they actually had a sort of quote-unquote preview for a potential Super Nintendo CD version of Seventh Guest. So that is, to be fair, somewhat at the heart of how we've ended up with this. Donald Terrio pitched it to us of NWR News fame. That was one of the sort of main kernels of the idea there. There was that this might have been, one of the games that would have come with a Super Nintendo CD had it happened, instead of the whole, bust up with Sony and the Philips deal and everything that actually did happen in our reality. But yes, this game, this article with the terminology and all that is an absolute pitch perfect trip back to that era, the sort of the jargon and everything. But we'll get to that later.
And it came out of Virgin Interactive specifically. Which, John, if you and I had the time, we're trying to keep this episode brisk. If you and I had the time, I could take you on a ride through Virgin's history of acquisitions that would take 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Like, I'm just going to give you some names, some companies. Titus Interactive.
Nice. The Fox.
Hasbro. Blockbuster. Like it just goes on and on. Oh, Mastertronic. Remember Mastertronic? They're in here.
Yep.
Sega's in here because they bought Mastertronic, leaving Virgin Interactive as a husk. This could go on forever. Richard Branson has done it again. And by it, I mean crimes.
You mean everything.
Yeah, but this isn't like the first video featured game. I want to say Floor 13 has some video in it. That's 91. And I want to, what was the other game? With Jimmy White Snooker, I want to say might have had some video in it too. But again, this was very much kind of an experimental thing where games were coming out with the CD-ROM. That was the CD, before the CD-ROM came out, you really couldn't do that. There was no way to store video content in your game. I remember one of the first CD-ROM games we got was You Don't Know Jack. And it had a lot of audio content. A ton of audio content. The number of questions it had. They're all spoken. And of course all the trappings of the show and stuff. And I remember my father, when he saw me playing it, saying something along the lines of, "You're not going to leave that installed, are you? That's got to be at least a gigabyte with all that audio." And he was right. It was like a fifth of our hard drive was that fucking game. But most of it was coming off the CD. You just couldn't have done this stuff. You couldn't put this on floppy disks. Floppy disks only held, what was it? John, how big was it? It was 3 meg, 5 meg? I can't remember.
I can't remember.
Probably
we were
closer
talking about 3.5.
to 3, yeah.
Yeah, 3.5.
Ooh.
It's super tiny. jokingly small. I'm just gonna Google because now I need to know. But like
about 1.4 megabytes, a typical
oh
floppy
my
disk.
god! Oh my god! Yeah, so
1.44.
Yeah, so that's not gonna get your video content into your game, no matter how many disk swaps you do.
No.
Or cassette-based PC systems, which were still probably a thing in '92.
Yeah, what's funny is this is the era where you had games that were across like 8 discs.
Yeah,
that's just not that you just like people just don't see that these days. But
simple games that were like 8 discs.
Yeah, like every RPG that you ever got, like they were all across like 6 discs, 8 discs, and just swapping those discs out. You would get to a point in the game and it would say insert disc 2, and you would take it out, insert disc 2, and keep going.
So suddenly you had roughly, it's not entirely accurate, about 600 megabytes of data to play with. And so you would slam your highly compressed video, your pre-rendered CG backgrounds, your everything into using up that space. And we see this continue on in the console space a handful of years later on like the PlayStation, where that becomes a big selling feature for games.
Redbook audio, man. Huge.
Yeah, Redbook audio, pre-rendered video, pre-rendered backgrounds, textures, like huge numbers of textures relative to what you could do in a cartridge. And very quickly, they burn through that storage space. I mean, Final Fantasy VII came on 3 discs, I think?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so like even then, like suddenly we're going through. But the disc is also a cheaper thing to make than even a floppy disk, because there's other mechanical pieces to it. It's a very simple thing. You literally press it. Like it's so much faster and cheaper that it was, this was very easy and very doable. So yeah, Seventh Guest is also kind of not early click adventure game stuff, but it is relatively early. It did get sequels.
Well, yeah, I mean the point and click adventure game it existed before then, but this is more of a. I guess it was maybe one of the earlier ones to just use the mouse, right? Like I feel like the adventure game before they were point and click adventure games, they were text adventure games, and you had to type in first. Like you didn't even have graphics, and you just read what was happening on the screen. Eventually, they got graphics, but they would have text parsers where you would say like go north, and then you would move. You would explore a different place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those always had a very limited audience. Like it's when they had graphics to go with them. Like true graphics to go with them.
Yeah, but I mean, like even once they got graphics, they still had a parser, and like I can't remember. I think it was like LucasArts who invented the point and click, basically.
Yeah, essentially, because the mouse is not as old as some people might think it is. It came fairly late to the experience, as it were, for computers. Like it might have been in the early 80s. I'm trying to find the list of like what's the first considered to be the very first point and click adventure game.
Well, I'm not sure. Yeah. Anyway, like I feel like the Seventh Guest, one of the things that probably broadened its appeal was that it was easy to play, and that it was you just need the mouse. You didn't need to learn any kind of weird shortcuts on the keyboard.
Or try to interpret the game's parser.
Right. You just had to point and click, and your mouse pointer would change if you could interact with an element. So it's very simple, and so that probably helped a lot. And then like there was the allure, the appeal of those amazing digitized graphics.
Yeah, at the earliest, we're talking about 89. It would have been a proper point and click. At the earliest. So this isn't that far off from that. And yeah, now those Scum games looked very primitive. They look very primitive. And then now you've got, hey, it's pre-rendered backgrounds and photography and video. Although the video effects look very bad to a modern eye. But on a screen like we would have had back when I was a kid, which was probably, I don't know, 256 color, which is a nightmare to think about, and very low resolution, like sub TV resolution. It probably looked fine.
Yeah, probably. Also, it was probably like 13, 14 inches, right? You didn't have 70-inch TVs back then. If you did, you were extremely rich.
Yeah, I think ours was 17-inch. Like, it was big. But like still, it was big and had very few colors that it could display. So like, you know, at a certain point, like, yeah, it's big, but like whatever. So this game, yeah, it would have seemed extremely impressive. But it also would date very quickly.
Yeah. Although I don't know. Like, I find that the it's weird because like you go back to it today and like it is a shock. Like I was like I saw the ads growing up. I imagined what this game would be like. And I imagine sophisticated entertainment, right? Like I just imagine, like, oh, this is for adults. Like it looks spooky. There are skeletons. I'm guessing that, you know, and like yeah, like it seems advanced. The graphics are like nothing that my you know, Super Nintendo can produce. And then like you actually play it, and what a shock to see. Like the opening intro about what's his name, Henry Stauff.
Yes.
Ex-hobo, now toy maker extraordinaire, who seems to be making evil toys that just capture children's souls for reasons.
Toys inspired by visions he had in his dreams.
Right, his dreams, which turned him around. Like he used to be a hobo, just beating up old, you know, grandmas for just pocket change.
Yeah,
and then like he has this dream of making a doll or something. Or maybe like a wooden carved something. And then like he just becomes incredibly rich selling crappy toys to children and their parents.
That then suddenly kids who have them start dying.
Yes.
And he has this mansion and he invites these people to come to his party and then ensnares them there, which is very much kind of a standard trope for kind of a gothic horror story.
Tapes on Haunted Hill would be what I'd think of, you know, Vincent Price.
Yeah, but also like the whole trying to tempt people with, you know, whatever their hearts desire or whatever. Like it's very needful things, right? Like I wrote on the Discord that basically like this writer whoever wrote this game definitely was reading Stephen King, just like every single person in the world was reading Stephen King in the early 90s.
It's around about similar time in the mid-90s, isn't it? There's that John Carpenter film like In the Mouth of Madness or whatever, where you have a very thinly veiled Stephen King stand-in, Sutter Kane, where it's just like the idea of like so many people read his work that like he becomes God. Essentially, so, this is how popular Stephen King was. Is it that anybody could? Obviously, yes, it's an absurd extrapolation, but he had to be ridiculously popular for anyone to even think that could be the concept of a movie. Essentially,
yeah, and like his cast is basically the Gilligan's Island cast for this fucking. So, like, I'm not even joking. So you had. I wrote their names down. Maritime, who is this attractive younger woman. Well, she's younger than pretty much all the other adults.
Well, you actually paid attention to the different characters that we see. Like I
didn't at the start, and then I felt like it was probably important, so I went back and did the research.
It's not always the easiest either, because again, with the low quality of the video of the actual actors. And the sort of the transparency effect on it, right. You know, which ultimately kind of made sense why, but for a lot of it, I was like, why are they transparent? I don't, you know, like what? Surely the video is so much of the appeal of this game, right? There's just like, oh look, ghosts. It's like video, you know, like yeah, it's but surely you know these people. aren't ghosts, but yeah, eventually in the context of the story, it just makes sense that it's like, okay, well, everything's like a sort of ghostly replay of past events, but up front, it just didn't seem that logical. But more to the point, it's just like I was wondering if there was any technical underpinning to it, because you would think that you want the appeal. I mean, this was very much like the other side to me. I didn't have a PC until after this came out. My family didn't have one until after this this game would have come out, and not one that would have had a CD-ROM drive on it until years later than that. So yeah, this was like the other side. This was like, okay, this multimedia thing's happening over there, and you don't really kind of get to take part. But even years later, and you'd have something like the Encarta CD encyclopedia.
Oh yeah,
and it would have little bits of video, and it was impressive in some way, and that was years after this. But I was a little bit sort of, kind of jarring. I guess it was I found it difficult to tell apart some of the characters sometimes because of the fact that everything's so kind of low res, but also the transparency.
It's tough because they didn't do a very good job. So the transparency, I think it is technical, but not so much like we did the transparency because we have to, but because to try to represent the fact that what you're doing right now. So your character has come into the mansion years after the events in question, and he's basically seeing the spectral echo of that event. And now you'd probably do like a fog effect over it, or you do some kind of transition to show that time has passed or something, like, something to kind of give a visual hint to the audience that everybody's shorthand of, you're not seeing the event live. This is something that's happening in the past. This is probably the only thing they could do, because they probably didn't have the toolkits. I mean, they were probably doing this on a video toaster, which is the whole thing I'm not going to go into. But basically, they probably were editing this on a goddamn Amiga. The limits, because that's what the peak of video editing technology was. It was a video toaster hooked up to an Amiga. Well, at least for a hobbyist, and this was obviously not like a major production studio thing. So they probably were using like a video toaster and an Amiga, which is crazy, but it is what it is. Yeah, like now you'd have a lot more tools at your disposal you could do to kind of get that visual language of, this is the spectral echo of this event. But here they just sort of turn the transparency down, or turn the opacity on the video down and layered it over, which is actually an effect that, echoes early movies that were doing this kind of like, it's a ghost, or they would just literally put the film on top of the other film when they shot it, which is so stupid and silly and funny. Or they like stuff like that, or I think they might have bleached the film sometimes to try to make it seem thinner or stuff. They did weird shit just to make it work. But yeah, so I did follow the plot. I got a little bit of help after, so I started just kind of not really paying that much attention to it because it was hard to follow. And then I realized, this is probably important. So I went back and caught up and just wrote down everybody's name, and just kind of who they were. So like, as I was saying, these are all like characters from fucking Gilligan's Island. You have the attractive younger woman, Martine, I guess, Martine. Yeah. She is looking for financial stability and more than happy to use her looks to get them. She is consistently targeting Edward Knox, who's an older, wealthy man, who is very much not interested in his wife anymore. His wife, Eleanor, still wants to continue their relationship. She is interested in saving Tad, who I'll get to in a minute, who's just a little boy, whereas Edward is essentially has money problems and basically wants to start over with money and also with Martine because he wants a hot new young thing. There's Julia, who is an older woman who used to be quite pretty but no longer is, and she wants her youth back. There's Brian. This is This is the one I struggle with a little bit. I'm pretty sure he... Yeah, I'm pretty sure he just wants money, but I'm not entirely sure what the deal is with that one. And then, because again, it's not super well, his is particularly not well developed. And then there's Temple, who is a stage magician who just wants to know if magic is real and is probably among all the other characters or the other adults, the one who's most seems to understand the most what Stalf is doing. And understands that there's something supernatural in play. The others come to realize it as things go on, but he seems very aware very early that Stalf might be something demonic. He is the only one, I think, that actively tries to help Tad, who is a boy who essentially broke into the house on a dare and got trapped along with all the adults. He is the titular seventh guest, and the puzzle Stalf lays out for them is essentially to sacrifice Tad to get whatever their heart's desire is. Essentially, it's like that's basically he doesn't. I don't think he ever explicitly tells them. I think he basically sets it up as a puzzle that they have to solve. And I want to say that the first person who figures it out is Temple, who then realizes I'm not going to kill a fucking kid. And tries to save Tad for the remainder of it, but Tad is freaked out by everybody there, including the ones who, once they realize it, are trying to kill him, so he essentially continues to avoid him. What we get is a kind of an asynchronous storytelling of this, because it's what you... Some rooms unlock other rooms, so you solve a puzzle. Basically, the idea is you're in this mansion, and when you start, you could probably only open like 2 or 3 doors in the mansion total. You go into a room, and you get a video sequence, and it is of one or more of these characters interacting or soliloquying, as the case may be, about what Stalf has promised them, or about their problems, or strategizing how to solve the game. You hear a lot of these characters trying to form alliances, even though Stalf tells them explicitly only one person will be leaving and winning this game. So the plan doesn't really make any sense. And then if you click around, you might get another little video trick where like a skelly boy might come out of the wall and go, "Roo!" and disappear again.
Well, you got 3 types of things, like cursor icon things, haven't you? In terms of like you've got the theatrical mask, which is like it's going to play a scene. You've got the brain for when there's a puzzle, and then you've got the chattering teeth when there's just like a gag, basically just like a sight gag of like this painting that's on the wall, there's hands coming out of it, or it starts like animating and doing silly things or whatever like that. That's pretty much the 3 different types of sort of cursor thing, other than like the movement based stuff with the skeleton hand that you can sort of have with interacting.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that was like impressive back then and dumb today. Just like very much in that kind of Encarta encyclopedia way of like, oh my god, this is interactive! I can't believe it. Like these little scenes with like the chattering teeth. It's like it's the dumbest little animations, but yeah, like they were just trying to make kind of a weird fun house of a game, I suppose.
Right.
What I was surprised by is that I was reading about the sequel, The 11th Hour, and like they had a new director work on it because they started the sequel before they finished the game, The Seventh Guest. And so like the guy who wrote the Seventh Guest was stuck kind of dealing with kind of last minute bugs and stuff like that, so he couldn't work on the sequel, and it seemed like the whole team had moved on to that, and like he was feeling very frustrated about the whole situation. But also like they brought in like a different director who wanted to make things more mature, and at some point the director of the Seventh Guest walks in on the set of The 11th Hour, and there's just like this woman like fully topless, wearing like leather boots, and like it's and he's just like, what the fuck? Like he was very much trying to make a family game,
Yeah.
with the seventh guest, except that like
It's about
having
murdering
played
a
the
kid.
seventh, I know,
Yeah,
right?
really.
Yeah, but there is that kind of funhouse quality to it. Like like that. So that explains a lot of the silliness I find, but it doesn't explain the way too long bit of audio where we just hear a couple of the characters just moaning, having sex.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's kind of this silly quality to it, and it feels like it dances around things enough for the most part. And then there's just like was it Dutton, the guy with the sort of British-ish accent.
Yes.
Did he just get stabbed like quite nastily? Like there's just every now and again there's a little bit of it where it's like this feels like it's gone beyond some threshold that they kind of sketched out at some point. But
Temple just gets strangled to death by Julia while a child watches. It's like holy shit.
But then some other character just what is kind of evacuated with the bathwater. Just
Yeah, just suck down the drain.
Yeah.
Because there's this weird, like, some of this stuff is supernatural, but some of it's just a dude gets stabbed. It's very weird. Like, it's clear that there is a demonic presence here, but we don't really address it. It's just weird shit that's not natural happens. Like, yeah, a dude gets sucked down the drain. And you yourself can go down the drain to access part of the mansion, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So the mansion has these shortcuts, and sometimes they just lead from one room to another, and they're only useful if you remember exactly where you're trying to go and what that shortcut, where it is and where it leads to, and it's not obvious because the map is not very helpful.
No, it's anti-helpful sometimes.
But sometimes some of those shortcuts just lead you to the room with the book, which is where you can get hints on puzzles. And by hints, I mean anything from you get the solution to you get just like the freaking instructions for whatever the hell you're trying to do.
I mean, maybe not even the instructions, maybe like a hint at the instructions. But to kind of finish what I was talking about, you go into a room, you solve the puzzle, you see the video, every room has a puzzle. You find the puzzle by looking for it on the mouse. Sometimes you have to navigate around the room to find it. Sometimes it's right at your feet, so it's easy to miss it. There's one in particular that's a problem, and I missed it like 3 or 4 times. You interact with the puzzle, you play the puzzle. We'll get to the puzzles in a minute. And in so doing, you might get another video. You might not. It might just solve the room. It'll shade the room out on your map to tell you finished it, and it will unlock another room, or more than one other. It might unlock multiple other rooms. It might also make rooms you've already been at have a video play now. So there might be a hint in the video, like you might see 2 characters talking about going to talk to a third character. That's your hint that you might have unlocked that room when you solve this puzzle, or if you've already unlocked that room, that there's something there now that wasn't there previously. Like sometimes you have to go back to a room. In one case, you have to interact with the stairs. There's no indication why you should have to interact with the stairs. You just do, but you can't do it until later. And essentially your job is to essentially go to all the rooms and solve the puzzle in every room. And once you've done that, you effectively unlock the last puzzle. But because the rooms don't necessarily unlock in a fixed order, you might get those story sequences. You almost certainly will get those story sequences out of order. So there is a certain amount of asymmetrical or asynchronous storytelling here. Kind of like we talked about this with Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah, they got there first.
I kind of wish we had talked about it during our top 5 segment. Where you get pieces, and if you get the pieces in certain orders, it feels very mysterious because you're like, why are they talking about this Hylian woman having sex with this camel man? Which is a thing that happens in Zelda is the product of a camel man and a Hylian woman having sex. I'm sorry, that's core canon now. Have fun with that knowledge. But there is it feels, because the videos themselves are very disjointed and they're delivered with, I'm going to say, community theater acting.
Yeah,
at best.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Community theater, that's what it feels like.
The microphone usage in this, and I'm going to get nerdy for a second, so just deal with it, is extremely poor. So what I mean by that is the mics were good in 93. We had good microphones. We've been using microphones for a very long time. It wasn't like cameras, digital cameras. It wasn't like digital video. The microphone stuff should have been bulletproof, but it wasn't. And I can tell why. A lot of times they were using microphones that were not appropriate for the scene they were shooting. There were multiple instances where, based on echo, I could tell they were using some kind of shotgun. And the place they were in didn't have good echo abatement. And so you had weird muffling or weird echoing. And the tools for cleaning up audio weren't as good then as they are now. So that part is potentially problematic. But they could have very easily lapel mic'd everybody and just done it. And in some scenes, I think they did. In some scenes, I think they ADR'd. And in some scenes, the audio is just not right. Like, it's not bad because of the transference. Like, you could just hear it wasn't done right in the recording. And it's so fucking frustrating because it makes it hard to hear what people are saying. But
like their budget was ultimately not that high, you know.
Yeah, but microphones should have been like, you just rent those. You just rent them.
Sure, but then like you probably had to hire the person who knew that they needed to rent a certain type of mics.
There were a division of Virgin. Virgin Media definitely had someone they could leverage.
Yeah, but they were kept at an arm's length. Probably we don't have time to get into that, but yeah, like they didn't. Virgin was not confident in this game's reception and like the serious subject matter, you know, and so
I guess
they were kind of spun off and like they were kind of, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I mean they should have ADR'd the whole thing.
Sure.
ADR.
Yeah, because I mean, let's face it, the quality is so kind of partial, you know, it's so unclear that, I mean, if it was imperfect lip sync, I mean, who would really have noticed or cared that much?
Yeah, basically, it just replacing the dialogue with an overdub, essentially. It would have just made things so much cleaner. Or just plan to overdub the whole thing. It would just make everything so much cleaner and clearer and much easier.
Yeah, that's how the Italians did it with films. So, you know, I mean, it probably would have been like about the right energy.
Them. You know,
Italian
when in
Gothic
Rome, if
horror,
you will, right, Greg?
The masters of cinema.
It would have been a good fit for this sort of thing, to be honest. But there you go.
I've seen so many Italian Gothic horror films about people being trapped in a mansion with someone who wants to kill them. You would think there could only be one or two of those, but there's like 7.
So, Greg, you're saying that Sergio Leone would have approved of the Seventh Guest?
Oh yeah, it's definitely up there with the Dollars trilogy.
I could definitely.
Or rather, it would have been had they done what James recommended.
All right, I could read it between the lines, Greg.
I'm just thinking Bloody Pit of Horror more than anything, which is just terrible. Just an awful movie. But yeah, there is a lot of Bloody Pit of Horror in this, except there's not so many attractive women running around in their underwear because, again, this is not an Italian production. But yeah, so that's basically the plot, except that Tad, who is the titular seventh guest, was always supposed to get sacrificed because there is some demonic entity involved who needs the sacrifice. These children being trapped in dolls that Guillaume alluded to is something that's revealed late in the game. That's part of the demonic sacrifice, I guess. And I guess this is the trade that our villain here, Stauf, had to make for his wealth, and Tad's it. But what we're seeing, what we find out at the end, and this is super obvious twist, is that the character you are, who's seeing all of this later, is Tad as an adult, because Tad escaped. And basically, you're coming to finish whatever happened and condemn this cursed place to the abyss. Although I don't know that he doesn't know it at the time. Like, he's totally forgotten this part or blacked it out or whatever. And it's revealed to him at the end. Does the main character actually ever confront Stauf when he's an adult?
I don't think so.
It's very anticlimactic at the very end. It feels like something's missing, really.
He
It's
solves
like,
a puzzle.
You solve all these things to get to the extremely Amityville Windows attic,
Yes.
and then you sort of have this thing of okay, now Staff's gonna kind of consume the child, as a sort of demonic vector or something. But yeah, it really feels like there should be some other action that's like, okay, this breaks the cycle. This it changes it from
I was expecting
whatever
another
it's been.
puzzle, like a final puzzle.
Even if it was just like kind of, one of these things that's almost, a little bit like, this is a very lofty comparison, but like the way that the very end of the final boss of Super Metroid is like a trivial thing, like you can't really lose, like you're just gonna kick the shit out of Mother Brain with the power that the baby Metroid gave you. But just something, even if it's like trivially interactive or difficult, but just an action that's like, this was it, this was the moment that the sort of the curse, the cycle was broken and the soul was saved or whatever. Just like, it just feels very much like something is actually missing. Some sort of extra element. They probably again didn't have the time, money to make it happen. It just kind of ends.
Yeah, like you solve a puzzle. Stalf, towards the end, you can hear Stalf's the echo of Stalf get mad every time you solve a puzzle. Or he goads you on when you leave a puzzle unsolved. Because the implication being his ghost is still there, stalking Tad as he goes through. And then you solve the last puzzle, and he goes, "No!" And then there's a video clip plays and credits. It's like, why did me turning on all the lights in this scale model of the mansion cause him to die? I don't get it. But
I don't know. It just seemed to me that you were interrupting the sacrifice or something.
But the sacrifice was in the past.
Yeah, it's a time loop, I guess. Surprise.
But you're Tad.
Again, what is different this time? You need something that's just like, okay, this has been a cycle, it's been playing out, but this time it's different, and you need something to happen. It doesn't have to be a huge, like, super complex puzzle or anything. It just needs to be something that gives us that moment.
There needed to be another child involved then.
But my counterpoint to all this is that this game's story is very stupid.
But sure,
like he needed something, but like this game doesn't have it because it is very dumb.
Oh yeah, no, it is. It's very pastiche. We've already mentioned the Stephen King stuff. Like again, I mean the whole like kid was in like a house on a dare type of thing. I mean that is like right out of Salem's Lot. That is a huge part of Salem's Lot is that he went in the house that ends up being the vampire nest like years later, but he went in there on a dare as a child and saw a man had hanged himself, and it was a traumatic experience. Like that's just right out Stephen King. Loads of, like the William Castle film House on Haunted Hill, all this stuff. Yeah, it's just like pastiche, just these various horror elements that they've all probably absorbed watching various things growing up and just smushed them together, and like this is a sort of vague approximation of those things, right? We've done it, and that's about it. That it's like I said, it was sometimes it was like even more goofy than I was thinking, and then other times, like I said, with the unexpected bit of violence, or somebody gets stabbed to death, it's like, well, that was a bit more sort of harsh than I was imagining. So it kind of, they didn't quite have a sort of tone firmly established and maintained throughout, but mostly it's just kind of silly.
There was definitely a moment where it felt like it was getting really silly, and I thought we were going to go like straight up Mr. Bones, Sega Saturn, where a skeleton jumps out and starts playing xylophone on its ribcage. Like we were really getting to that point.
Well, I mean, you almost had that at the very end, where you open up the chest and the room right before the very end, where you open up the chest and the skeleton pops out. I was like, oh god, here we go.
Yeah, that was what I was expecting. Some like Fritz Freeling bullshit to get played out. But no, they kind of kept waffling on that point. Like honestly, at the end, it could have just been like you find Stalf's body lying there because he didn't complete the sacrifice the first time, and he's just lying there, and then him having the realization that he was Tad, and that Stal failed, and maybe Stal's spirit confronts him one last time, and he realizes this is my sacrifice. He's an adult now. It's no good. I've truly failed, and he's gone, and that's it. And then you could have the house crumble down like it's the fall of the House of Usher, and you're done. You're out. Yeah. Everything's good.
So the listeners are similarly underwhelmed by the story as we were. I've got some comments from the Discord. Scenario just concluded, like, I just finished the 7th guest, and the kindest thing I can say about the last hour or so of the game is that the end credits music is a bop.
Which you'll be hearing shortly.
Yeah. Someone asked them, Biconite asked, do you understand the plot? Because I figured the twist midway through, but I don't have a clue what the point was. And Scenario says, I kind of got it near the end, but the plot was never something that kept me going in terms of interest. Now that I've had time to get my thoughts together, I definitely feel like this game doesn't stand the test of time. It doesn't take away from its status as a classic, but it's very hard for someone who didn't experience this kind of game growing up to get much out of it now.
I agree.
Yeah, the puzzle design feels all over the place, and I felt very bummed out when parts of the end game were just larger version of an earlier puzzle. The use of FMV even feels muted because this version of the game tacks on ill-advised modern graphics like the clock. The performances overall were nice and hammy, which falls right in line with performances of the time. Overall, the game is fine, but the genre itself has moved on to better representation. Adventure games now don't need to do the kind of stuff that's being done here anymore, and can actually tell a full story with better cohesion too. I'm glad, I played it, I'm still not sure about that really. Experiencing it sure was something. Also, fuck that microscope puzzle.
Yeah, that puzzle sucks. Let's talk about the puzzles a little bit.
Yeah. So I quipped before we played it, like, oh, you gotta like some chess puzzles because there's at least one. And boy.
There's 3, and they're all bad, but some are worse than others. I want to quote Biconite here again real quick. Hey all, first time participating in a RetroActive. I just beat the game the other day. Puzzles were mostly fun. I quote cheated on 2 of them by using the book in the library, which I didn't know about till halfway through. Overall, a great reminder of where we came from, but could totally use some TLC. Also, I played on Switch. And then Dinges responds, wait, there's a book in the library to cheat? Yeah, there is. Boy, oh boy, that fucking microscope puzzle.
It's a weird... The book is weird because, as I said, like a lot of rooms, maybe all of them, have some sort of like weird shortcut to the book room, and
it definitely seems like the ones with the worst puzzles have it.
Yeah, and then like so you can see the hint, and I think there's up to 3 for each puzzle. Like increasingly helpful, I suppose.
It reminded me of Professor Layton with the hint coins, but obviously like Professor Layton's so much more enjoyable.
And then you click on the book and it just warps you back into the room that you were in, usually, if you're lucky. So that's that was appreciated, I gotta say.
Yeah, I think if you look at it in the context of the game back then, you can look think, that's actually quite smart. You can understand why you'd want that facility to be built in the kind of diegetic way of like trying to sort of maintain the whole kind of concept of it's in the house, it's a book there, it's a resource that you can use, and therefore you do have to go to the room to use it. And
why not just take the book with you?
And also what makes sense
haunted.
Back then, I guess, is the idea that, you would be told about this stuff in the manual for it.
Yes.
Manuals for PC games and adventure games in particular were often quite crucial. You might have like some sort of decoder thing in it or all this kind of stuff. I mean, I did make sure I kind of looked at the manual online with this up front, because I do remember like ages and ages ago when we did Killer 7 retroactive. Like there was something that came up where I was like, I didn't appreciate that something was going on, and in the comments someone said like, that's in the manual, And I had bought my Killer 7 copy secondhand PS2 version. It didn't have a manual, so I always stuck with me for like some of these. I should look it up if I can, if it's the type of game where that it might have stuff in it. And so that's where I saw the thing about the book and how kind of useful it could be. But for a reissue. Here, like, you would think that would be a relatively sort of obvious quality of life improvement waiting to happen, that it's just now the book is just an icon at the corner of the screen, where it's like, if you want to bring that up, you can just do it without physically going to the room. But seemingly, that was a bit beyond the scope of the version, that's on Switch anyway.
At the start of the game, I didn't even know about the book at all. I didn't find out about the book until I actually tried to look up the solution to the can puzzle online, and they said, oh, well, if you can't figure it out, just use the puzzle book. I'm like, what's the puzzle book? I'd never been into the library at that point because I was just kind of wandering around. And so I said, well, what's the puzzle book? Wow. Okay. And it says, hey, yeah, if you can't do this, you can just use the puzzle book 3 times and it'll solve it. I'm like, wow, that would have been cool to know right out of the gate. Just somewhere explained somewhere. Because it really wasn't, unless I completely missed it.
No, I said, I'm sure they were just thinking, well, you read about it in the manual. Like everybody reads
that's
it.
Exactly it. So on Reddit, they said, yes, it's in the manual. I'm like, well, there you go. There's no manual.
No, but that's the problem with when you're talking about games made years ago, especially I think PC games of this vintage, it was very much, you would have had to read the manual just to install the bloody thing in the first
but
place.
Still, to your point, Greg, like why was the original manual not even there?
Yes, well, exactly. Because
at the very least,
I looked it up on my web browser. I don't think there's an integrated way of looking at the manual, for instance. So it doesn't feel like the most kind of lovingly kind of recreated version here. I mean, I did all right on Switch with this. I used the kind of tabletop mode and a stylus to kind of do the cursor most of the time, because it's not direct. It's not like where you touch on the screen the cursor immediately goes to, but it's still, so you're kind of steering it around by touching the screen still, but it still felt a lot faster than doing it with the analog stick. And then you could still kind of navigate through the hallways and so forth with the Joy-Con or whatever's on the attached to your Switch. So that was okay. I didn't mind that part of it.
Yeah. For the cans puzzle, I'm not sure how you were supposed to solve it without going to the book, because they you can see that, I can move the letters around, but like, what phrase are you supposed to do? You're supposed to intuit, like, in what order the words that you can produce with those cans.
There's not much intuitive about that. The only thing that's sort of as apparent really is just like, okay, I've got a bunch of consonants and including an inordinate number of Ys. Right. So it is, that you could have somebody without any kind of hints intuit the notion of like, okay, I'm making words where Y is the vowel. Beyond that, though, it's and that's the point. I mean, the whole thing is meant to be, the kind of thing that isn't intuitive a lot of the time. It's meant to be that, you are going to kind of trip over yourself, like trying to figure out what it is, and then maybe eventually you'll say, okay, I'll go and check it in the book and it'll give it for me. Like it's not meant to be the kind of thing that's particularly kind of easy to figure out, not because it's like in intricate or whatever, but just because it's kind of there's an opacity to it at the very least. I feel like it's quite deliberate, but it doesn't make it particularly good design either.
And the puzzles don't have any kind of tie to the world they're in for the most part. There's a good one where it looks like you're about to do a maze, and that maze is relevant. It's embedded in the carpet, but then Stalf's voice comes out and basically taunts you, and suddenly, motherfucker, you're back in another chess puzzle. Have fun. There's no chess here, but you're here now. Welcome to chess.
Yeah, but so that's something I didn't realize until I looked up there is an actual maze puzzle in this game at some point.
So that maze, that in the carpet, and I figured this out, is the maze.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I figured that out quite quickly, and this is where the Switch's screenshot feature became a major boon. I took a screenshot, emailed it to myself, and then just drew it out.
The screenshotting is often useful. It was quite useful for Cocoon at various points, but definitely something like this is a helpful thing.
And this was like how this was expected at the time. I mean, like this came before Myst, but like Myst also, like you had this expectation in games like Monkey Island of being in a space and looking at the different things you could do, realizing like I can't do anything here, and then that's your clue that I'm supposed to find something else somewhere else. And especially these games that are almost like little like IQ tests or whatever. Eventually, like you're just like, okay, like these cans are stupid. I'm gonna go try to find some clues somewhere else. It's just that for that particular puzzle, that the only clue you get really is from the book, and that's kind of it's not. The other puzzles are not like that, I find.
Yeah, well, some of the other puzzles, the way you get the actual spoken lines of the sort of your character and stuff or whatever, like they will sometimes give some kind of legitimate guidance.
Even if, especially if you quit the puzzle, Stalf will sometimes give you he'll make fun of you with a pun or a hint that gives you some idea.
But then other times it really does feel like, I'm not sure exactly, how I'd really have a feeling. I mean, even, like the first hint in the book sometimes is cryptic enough that it's like, there's a few different ways you could interpret that. It's not really that sort of unambiguous about what the goal of this puzzle, the point of the puzzle is.
I think the first can one literally just goes, you make words with it, and I'm like, no shit. The only reason I made any progress on that one is the 2-letter words. So like one of the things you do in computer science is you understand we did ciphers and coding and stuff, and that was like, hey, start with your 2-letter words because there's a finite number of them, and if everyone has a Y in it, that makes it even easier. And then you just start eliminating by going, okay, what 3-letter words do you have? But yeah, I couldn't solve it because there's shit like slyly.
I think one of the weakest ones for me was the one where you sort of almost got that kind of where you're making words by like kind of going along that almost like a board game, and it involves making the phrase "the sky is ruddy."
Yes.
Ruddy? I mean, really?
Yeah.
I mean, like, I can't even think of, like, Americans even using that word, to be honest. Exactly. It's just, like, something that,
You're right.
elderly British people would have used when I was a child. You know what I mean? Like, where is that coming from?
Yeah.
Well, he's keeping it period authentic to when the game is set, obviously.
Yeah. I thought
that one got me mad.
The Piano Simon game was like, I was like, really?
Oh, this ridiculous!
It's just too long.
Absolutely ridiculous.
I was just like, after about the seventh key, I was like, I'm out.
It's preposterous how long that goes on.
So Greg and I talked about this one before we recorded last week. I think it's 28 characters long.
It's ridiculous.
And it's not like you just play all 28. It's bum, 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 bum. 28 fucking deep.
No, it's like I found like that. There's several puzzles like that where I'm like, I if I really wanted to, I could sit here and diagram this puzzle out and solve it myself. But I'd just rather not.
Well, but it really is. I think the biggest thing about that, some of that's just baked into the nature of that specific puzzle, but also any of the puzzles. Which, as we've said, they don't tend to be that upfront. They don't tend to be that ruthlessly logical. So, you need to kind of play with them. And that's a lot of what they are, to be fair. They are audiovisual toys for people to play with. And that was a lot of the appeal, is that it was a kind of audiovisual toy that would have had a great deal of novelty for people. So you wanted to play around with them. But the problem is with the novelties worn off for us, in the present day, what's painfully apparent is just how slow they are to play with in every instance. If there's always an animation that, again, I understand it because that was the point, is having some, for the time, lavish animation of these things, like the slices pieces of the graveyard cake, coming out of the cake.
Oh my
that
God.
really early one.
You can't skip them if you press B.
But
Thank God.
But there's a delay to that even.
Yeah,
There is,
everything, even some of the things where, and again, some of this is obviously going to be technical limitations. Some of it is just the desire to show off, the visual, the sort of flair that's going on. But the fact of the matter is everything is painfully slow to deal with. It's just like experimenting with these things, whether it's like swapping the positions of chess pieces, that microscope puzzle with the sort of microbes that kind of take over, their kind of the opponent's microbes or whatever. It all it feels so very long in each case. Playing sound effects and animations and just again, you would talk about frictions. It just feels like there's an awful lot of friction playing with these toys, and it makes them less fun to play with.
There's a lot of micro frictions and macro frictions in every puzzle. Like that. I mean, the microscope one's particularly ghoulish because of the going second is such a massive advantage, and the AI gets to. And they can just constantly respond. Like you have to make moves in the open. They get to respond. It's sort of the inverse of like a lot of games that play like this. Like if you were to play Go or something, like going first is a huge advantage. This one, it's a massive disadvantage. And the game uses that to the point where you almost have to play perfectly to beat it. I found a guide online from like the Usenet era where somebody basically gave you an algorithm to beat the AI, literally in text form because it's a Usenet. It's like 94. And I was just reading it and I'm like, okay, I see why that works. And it follows what my brain had intuitively said, hey, if you're going to beat them, this is the tactic you want to use. I'm like, okay, I get it. I could do that. I just didn't want to. Because it wasn't like, you'll beat them in 9 moves. It was like, no, you're going to have to play every single fucking space on this map, watch the animation, and go. It's like, no, I'm going to hit the book 3 times. But I had to go walk back to the library 3 times, which sucks. But I did it because it was like, I need this because I just don't want to fuck with this.
In that case, in particular, has a really aggressively unpleasant sound effect in terms of for hearing it that many of that sort of... over and over and over and again. It's just, too much.
Yeah, it's one bit where I just turned off the sound for a bit.
So that's the thing, though. A lot of the puzzles are fundamentally sound. Even the chess puzzles. It's just they're too goddamn long.
Yeah,
like some of them.
Like in one of the. I mean, I used an FAQ for a lot of this stuff, and the one puzzle, chess puzzle where you have to get all the white pieces on one side and the black pieces on the other. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then I look at the solution for it. It's like 30 steps long. I'm like, what is this?
And that's the
like
min-maxed solution.
They're like Iron Man puzzles. It's really weird. Like they just go usually for way too long.
Like 4 times longer than they should in some cases.
A note on the puzzles is that I see in Wikipedia that they had intended to use puzzles that turned out to be under copyright. So they used puzzle books from the 19th century.
Wow.
And the thing is, like, some of these puzzles...
that Ruddy is starting to come into real clarity now.
Yeah,
some
exactly.
of these puzzles required knowledge that I was kind of like, This requires a little bit of background knowledge that you might not
stupid
have.
about the bishop puzzle because I obviously now in hindsight, you could only place them in squares where they would not be in danger of being taken. But as I was moving the pieces around, my brain did not jump to that conclusion. I was just why can I move it there and not here?
No, exactly. And again, because it all is so slow to even try this stuff out, it kind of makes it slower for you to realize what it's getting at. That is designed for you to experiment and play with like a toy, but it actually is a slow and kind of not particularly joyful process. Just by the standards of today. I mean, the thing is, back then it's just like it's assuming a level of buy-in from the player up front that you wouldn't assume today. You know, it's just like,
No.
oh, these people, they paid, you know, a good amount of money for this. They're expected some sort of, you know, technical showpiece that they've never seen before. They're going to follow us. They're going to, you know, they're going to be willing to sit there and, you know, watch these animations play out again because they're cool, because they haven't seen them before. You know, that is, it's
also, like, they're sitting at their computers and they've got nothing else to do on them, really.
Yeah,
Other than, like, do some word processing, print out some whatever. But, like, it's not like they're going to go into internet. Like, most people didn't have the internet.
No,
and
no,
I did,
absolutely.
and there wasn't much to see.
No, I mean, I
Right.
was online. I think before we had a CD-ROM drive, like on that first PC. But
Same.
yeah, there was nothing. I loaded up, you know, some like really early Nintendo website, you know, the official website at one point, like incredibly slowly. You know, probably like on a 14K mode, dial-up mode.
So, see,
That's
yeah,
about it.
people in the early 90s at computers were used to waiting. for
Yes,
everything.
no, exactly. No,
Oh,
again, yeah,
you were waiting for your system to boot up.
for
Was a major
everything,
thing.
absolutely
Yeah,
everything,
time.
exactly. But I mean, the point is, I guess, you know, when you look at some of these things in retrospect, and not just this, it's just in general. So I mean, we had this even, you know, with something like you know, the Mario Sunshine retroactive, you know, which was a game that I had so much affection for, you know, and a lot of good memories of, and then you play it. And you know, you played some of it thinking like, you know, well, why was I so taken with this? And I think a lot of it is not just like something that's novel, as is in this case, but it's what that novelty says about where it could go. It's the possibilities that they represent, you know. And I mean, another thing that was germane to this time period was like Jurassic Park, right? The T2, those early sort of uses of CGI in films, and like you know, probably one of my favourite cinema going experiences is see Jurassic Park in the cinema. And to be fair, Jurassic Park holds up relatively well later. I saw it a few years ago. I mean, obviously it's
Surprisingly well.
It's not as impressive as it used to be, but actually a lot of it is because, you know, they didn't overuse the CG. There's a lot of really great
they showed
practical
restraint.
effects. Yeah, well, some of it's because they weren't even planning to use CG. They were going to use stop motion for the wide shots, and then CG came along like midway through, basically, in that case. But anyway, the point is you know, Jurassic Park's a very, you know, effective movie. But I think the reason why it was such a special cinema going experience, because it wasn't just, oh, I'm seeing the T-Rex, I'm seeing the raptors. It was like, God, if they can do this, what else can you do? And you almost in your head, you're thinking about, you know, one day you could do Middle Earth, you could do any superhero you wanted. And then eventually it all came true. But that's what was so exciting about that. And, you know, this kind of stuff, I mean, it might seem really, you know, kind of low-level, silly japes now. But, you know, the fact that it's video, you know, on a PC in a game, you know, like real sort of, you know, images. There was something for not just in this particular window of time, but for years later, even with stuff like that, you know, preposterously cheesy intro to the original Resident Evil. Again, which is like, you know, you watch, it's just fucking dire. But at the time, it excited people because it's like, not just because of what it actually was, but because of what it represented. That this was somewhere we could go. We could get, you know, this is here right now and it's exciting. But imagine where we're going to be. And of course nowadays, I mean, it's all old hat. We've you know, we've seen everything.
Oh, yeah.
It's all that, you know.
But it's true that, you know, the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park jump so that the weird rubbery digital stuntment of Blade 2 could leave.
Oh God. So to your point, Greg, in '94, what was it called? Monty Python Complete Waste of Time came out, which is another CD-ROM experience. That had a lot of video, much higher quality video, but it wasn't in the context of a game. It was like, there's some time wasters, there's some screensavers, so like this is your digital toasters, which was a big thing. Flying toasters, excuse me. There's like stuff happening, and there is video, but it wasn't like this is video embedded in the actual game itself. And that was a year earlier, and I actually had that because I was a kid, and I was really enamored with fart jokes, and thought it was like fucking magic. Same, and you mentioned Encarta, fucking MS Bob, Jesus Christ. The first Encarta, which is what we got with our first Windows 95 PC, was like sorcery. I mean, I went through that thing a dozen, and that's 2 years, real effectively, almost 3 years later. But you do really, it's not till like 96 that you start seeing like video well embedded in the game, looking really good and feeling organic. So like a good example is that Titanic point and click adventure. Where the video is just in the game itself. There's another Monty Python one. They were really into those early interactive video games. Like that genre, especially in the point-and-click adventure space, really starts leaning in hard on video to differentiate itself from the stuff that had happened earlier in the decade, like the Scum Engine stuff, which is not unsurprisingly around the time that LucasArts starts to fall out of the genre. Because now they're getting pressure from people who are doing something different. Maybe not making games that are as good, but that's not what the audience is looking for at this point. And you start seeing video crop up in things like, JRPGs. And you have suddenly that you just get banger after banger of like videos to kick off PlayStation games. Like, go watch the fucking... this is me branching again. Go watch the fucking intro of Soul Edge from the
Wild
PlayStation.
Arms. Wild Arms video all
Wild
over
Arms
it.
intro is amazing.
It is.
It is goddamn amazing.
Yeah, it's
Chrono Cross has an absolutely killer introduction video, and song to go with it. Final Fantasy VII has a very small amount of video ultimately, but that was all over the marketing campaign. And you start seeing video creep into even things like shooters. There were the Star Wars games that LucasArts put out. Rebel Assault. They're bad fucking games.
Yeah.
Rebel Assault 2 is a terrible fucking game. But it is incredible video for the era. Shockingly good video. That looks well produced on CG sets that now don't stand up super well. But full costumes, good frame rate. It's not all pixeled as shit. There are droids running around making droid noises. It all felt real and organic at that point. And even like that's a shooter. It plays like goddamned garbage.
Yeah, that was pretty, even for me who didn't have access to this, so when I talk about sort of seeing the other side, that would definitely be one where it's like, this seems cool in theory, and then you'd see it reviewed and people just shat on it hard, and it was kind of like, I guess, some of it was kind of comforting yourself, the fact that you didn't have access to, this world, multimedia world of CD stuff at that time, but it's like, it's all, it's all flash and no substance, stuff like fucking Sewer Shark on the Mega CD or whatever. It's all
plumbers don't wear ties.
It's all rubbish. You're not missing anything. That I could tell myself that, and there was some truth in it. But equally, it's quite possible if I had access, I might have been just as taken with it. And I said that sense of potential as a lot of other people were at the time.
I mean, there's a whole generation of systems that only exist because of the promise of being able to put video on. Philips CDI's entire raison d'etre is that you could put video in it. Like, otherwise, it doesn't offer a compelling gaming experience. In fact, how it used CDs makes it an uncompelling gaming experience. It makes it fundamentally unresponsive.
I see that you've selected Demolition Man.
Yeah, exactly. And that game, I mean, one thing I would describe about us playing that game is how remarkably unresponsive it was. Mm-hmm. Like, you'd put input in, it would think about it, because it's literally trying to find it on the disc. And then it would play the result of you pressing that video, which was Sly Stallone running on a... Sly Stallone running into green screens that's been changed to a CG rooftop, because apparently they couldn't get B-roll of a goddamned rooftop. And like the CDI, John, what other CD systems am I missing here that are basically just, they only exist because the CDI? A CD.
There's the Philip. Well, there's the Commodore 64. There's a Commodore one, right?
Yeah. What was the one that was backed by the former EA guy?
What you talking about? 3DO?
3DO, yes.
Yeah.
3DO.
Trip Hawkins. Yeah.
Yep, Trip Hawkins. The Sega CD ultimately is one of these things.
Well, yeah. So there was one from Panasonic, but wasn't that just a rebrand of 3DO?
They
Yeah.
3DO was theirs.
Yeah,
Like, they
3DO
they
was
created the
Panasonic.
format. They licensed it. I'm sure there's other ones we're missing. Nuon
yeah.
was Nuon one of those? But like this hangs on for, I don't know, it's probably till about 97, 98 of like, we're putting CDs in our video in places they hadn't been before with the power of the compact disc. And yeah, it was on the bleeding edge of that bleeding edge. So in a way, that's part of why Seventh Guest is so historically noteworthy, and that's why it was so why it sold really well, and why people remember it.
And apparently, like, I've seen this in at least 2 places, so I'm gonna say it, but like it's basically it's rumors, like nothing is confirmed. But so Nintendo did acquire the rights for $1 million, I think, to have the Seventh Guest for their CD add-on, right? Their
Wow.
Nintendo PlayStation, because it was a big deal. But then they canceled, the CD add-on because of a story that's too long to get into right now. But the rumor is that when they bought the rights, they already knew that they were going to cancel it, and they were basically trying to keep the Seventh Guest out of the hands of Sega because they like it was such a system seller,
With the power of Seventh Guest and Sewer Shark, they will be unstoppable.
Exactly.
Well, to be fair, there was some of the same flim-flam going on about pre-rendered graphics that helped them land the decisive blow against Sega when deployed with DKC. So, maybe
Good point.
they were onto something with that bit of, sort of blocking that they did there, which brings me back to the article, the game from GamePro that Megayon Boshi provided us with, where they were, previewing the Seventh Guest potentially for the Super CD. And this just, for me, just sums up, the mindset and the context that people experienced it with, where it says, be prepared for shocking special effects that will likely haunt you long after you've played
True.
the game.
There's a couple that will haunt me.
Will use complex graphic processing techniques, including rendering, capital R, and morphs, very definitely capital M. Rendering produces realistic shading effects. Morphs produce weird shape-changing effects similar to those you've seen in the movie Terminator 2 and Michael
God.
Jackson's black or white music video. So this is the world that the game was born into. Just the 90s predilection for morphs can only be explained by just the sheer overwhelming joy that people felt at the novelty of, like, well, there's an image and there's another image and then they've changed one to the other, and it's amazing.
It's magic. It's magic.
It reminds you that the 90s wasn't, that far away from people like jumping out of the way of the oncoming train when film was born. And, it's like, we are the same people. We haven't evolved. We're the same dumb fucking shitheads we've always been and always will be.
Oh,
Wow.
What a way to end our retroactive.
Yeah,
on
I
the
agree.
Seventh
I think
Guest.
that's suitable.
What a way to start the year. It's the year of our... Maybe it's the last episode of the year. I don't know when this episode is going to come out, but theoretically it should come out on the 1st.
It's definitely not the year of
that-
our Lord.
Not anymore.
Nope.
Not after the Seventh Guest.
Nope.
So I'm going to say this is one of our more successful retroactives. The game wasn't very good, but it gave us lots to talk about, and I'll take it.
Yeah, Dingens on the Discord said one of the first things, this is probably the first retroactive I managed to participate in, and I already got the feeling that it might also be the most crappy game ever featured.
Oh, no.
It probably
no,
is
it's not.
No.
No, it definitely is not. We've done
But I
worse.
think it encapsulates the feeling in the Discord. People played the Seventh Guest and they were like, oh.
We've done
Okay.
much worse.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, we have.
So yeah, that will do it for this retroactive. And as we mentioned before, we're going to use the ending theme. Does anybody know what this song is called?
I think it's Skeletons in the Closet is actually what it's called.
Good. Perfect. That's exactly what it should be called. We're going to use Skeletons in the Closet for our ending music from the Seventh Guest. This is the end theme, and it is to quote our forum member or our Discord member, a bop. But I again, even when it played, I was like, what the fuck, where'd this come from? because it's so not in sync with what the rest of this game is.
Well, none of the game is in sync with what the
That's
rest
true.
of the game is.
So it fits, but it's out of sync in a way that previously nothing had been out of sync.
Sure.
It finds new and remarkable ways to be out of sync. So, I think that's gonna do it for us. Again, always emails, go to rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. That's rfn@nintendoworldreport.com. Thanks to everybody who participated in our retroactive of the 7th guest. We have some candidates for our next retroactive that came out of that exercise where we selected the 7th guest. We may have chosen poorly, but what would retroactive be if we didn't? And so on that, not knowing when this episode is going to air, but suspecting it might be in 2024, have a happy new year, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Later.
Bye-bye.
Closet, rattling to